What is going on, everybody? This is Beanie. Welcome back to another video. Guys, today is the start of my annual tutorial series, and like every other year, my first video in the tutorial series is, in my opinion, the most important one, in the sense that every single top player, every single great player that I know uses very similar settings on MLB The Show, and all the bad players I know use different settings. So yeah, let's go ahead and get into this, and let's talk about what settings most if not all the top players in MLB The Show use. Okay, first let's talk about your hitting settings, and the first thing is your hitting view. Now, a lot of people, a surprising amount of people are very anti-strike zone camera. The strike zone camera is the camera that you've seen me use that zooms way in on the strike zone, and the benefit of it is it allows you to read pitches and to track pitches way easier than any other camera in the game. The downside of it is that you don't get to see your player very well. It kind of cuts out your hitter, and for whatever reason, there are a lot of people out there who really enjoy seeing their hitter, but I personally, and most top players that I know, have chosen to kind of sacrifice that bit of, it's not even like really realism or anything, but just that bit of, you know, that are part of that enjoyment of the game in order to be better. And I would suggest that you do the same, but it is possible that there is some amount of preference to this. I do know a couple of top players who can get away using other settings for their hitting view, other cameras, you know, maybe the Show 16, not fisheye. I don't like fisheye very much. Maybe strike zone 2, strike zone 3, strike zone high, offset, something like that, where it pushes the camera just a bit further back from where it typically is. I've seen a lot of guys use offset zoom. That can be a somewhat effective camera, but for me, the most effective camera by far is the original strike zone. Okay, this next one is wildly divergent from a lot of people that I know that play the game, and I know a lot of the streamers that you watch use a completely different camera when it comes to this, but I have a very good reason why you should use in-play view, your in-play view on offense, the medium camera. You should use the medium camera. It is the superior camera. I'm not going to say that this is preference. Like, yeah, it kind of is, but you will make worse decisions whenever using dynamic camera. I see so many people using the dynamic camera whenever they're playing, and the dynamic camera is basically like when you hit the ball, the camera doesn't really adjust. It kind of stays behind the hitter, and it kind of looks at the ball from a distance, and you know, it's very tough to judge how far you hit a ball, how deep a ball is going, and because of that, it's very difficult to know when you should be tagging up, how aggressive you should be on the base paths, how good of a beat your opponent has on the ball. It's much tougher to see what's going on out in the field whenever you're using dynamic camera as opposed to medium. With medium, it's the perfect balance of being high up to where you can see everything going on, but not too high where your depth perception is thrown off. It follows the ball proportionally to how far the ball is going, so you can tell almost immediately if what you hit is going to be a home run or not, and you can tell if your opponent is going to catch the ball. Definitely use in-play view offense. And then finally, or not finally, but the next thing, there is no debate about this, the hitting face that all top players use. Every single top player, every single one of them uses zone hitting. Do not buy into the pure analog or the directional propaganda. It's propaganda. Zone hitting is where it's at. I've even seen, like, it's so crazy, some of the claims that are made around zone hitting. Like, I've seen some people say that top players use zone hitting as a crutch, as if it's not way harder to use zone hitting than it is directional or pure analog. It is harder. It's way harder. But the issue with it is that you have way more control over what's happening on the field. With directional, the area that your PCI ends up being, meaning where your bat ends up hitting the ball, is largely random, and the only thing that you're deciding is which way you want to hit the ball, not whether or not you hit the ball at all. And pure analog is basically just timing, and if you hit the ball, like it's basically a roll of the dice, whether or not you're going to hit the ball at all. And there are very easy ways online to exploit a pure analog or a directional hitter. A top player will figure it out very, very soon. So you need to use zone hitting. I don't know many people who will use the analog input type. It's a little slow. It does feel kind of cool to use the analog input type, but I would stick to buttons. That means that you're pressing X, you're pressing square to power swing, you're pressing circle to contact swing. Also, if you do choose to do analog, you can choose to stride, which means pull back and push up, or flick, which means just push up. But I would stick with buttons. Camera shift is for directional. Plate coverage indicator, your PCI. Okay, now this is almost all preference, because most top players, I actually differ from most top players. Most top players want that smaller, more precise PCI. So they'll have something that looks more like this. They'll have, Starfighter, inner PCI, or maybe Wedge, inner PCI with the altitude or the circle PCI center. The color, that can be anything. They may want it transparent. They may want it solid like I do. They may want it to fade out or something like that. Not me. I prefer the outer PCI, because I've always preferred the larger PCI in the grand scheme of things. I am gonna kind of toy around with the reverb PCI, but for right now I'm sticking with Starfighter. It's been good to me. The PCI inner, I go with I think I go with altitude, don't I? Pretty sure I've been going with altitude, and I have turned the inner PCI off completely because it reminds me the most of last year's game and games before that with the bigger PCI. And I know that those PCIs are less precise, but for whatever reason in my brain, my bat is quicker when I have a bigger PCI perceptually. I feel like I'm more precise with that bigger PCI, even though, it may look like I wouldn't be. So it's all preference. If you prefer an inner PCI to an outer, go with that. If you prefer an outer to an inner, go with that. This is 100% all preference. I don't think that there is one thing that is superior to the other. There just may be something that's superior for you personally, just because of the way that your brain works. But okay, that's it for hitting. Let's move on to pitching. Now, pitching is way more preference than hitting is. I have seen some top players that can get by using meter pitching or even pulse pitching or classic or something. I don't know if I've ever seen classic, but the majority of top players use pure analog pitching, and that's because it gives you the most control. That's where you pull back on the analog stick and then you push up, trying to time that and trying to push your PCI in the direction to where you can hit your spot perfectly. It gives you almost one-to-one control over where the ball is being thrown. You can make mistakes. It's very easy to make mistakes, but if you do make a mistake, you know that it was your fault and it was not just some random roll of the dice. And that's the whole thing with these settings, is that you want to put as much control of the game into your hands as possible. And pure analog pitching is the thing that does that. Okay, pitch feedback doesn't really matter. You can put that on or off. Okay, here is a big divergence in opinion. I see 1,000 top players using broadcast or outfield or something like that. Some camera that's behind the pitcher that kind of looks like you're watching it on TV. I can get that. I can get why they would want to do that. I prefer to use the strike zone pitching view, and there is a few reasons why. One is that it gives you an idea of what your opponent is seeing in the batter's box. Because since you're looking at it from probably the same perspective that he is, you can more easily visualize the pitches that he wouldn't want to see, what pitches are going to tunnel better together, while if you're in broadcast, it's going to be a lot more difficult to do that because you're at a completely different angle than your opponent. Another thing is that when you're in broadcast pitching, the pitching camera, it's very difficult to see what's going on out in the field. If there's a runner on first and he steals second, sometimes guys that are using the broadcast camera, it's very difficult to pick that up because you're looking at home plate and you're not looking at the runner behind you. Whereas if you're in strike zone, you can see the entire field, you know, everything that's going on. And then the final reason is that when it transitions from broadcast to medium, to the in-play view medium, that can be kind of a jarring. It can kind of throw you off, you know, because you're flipping perspectives. You're going from right to left to right, and you're having to figure that out very, very quickly because, you know, if it's a liner at your third baseman, you want to be able to react quickly to that. And I think that strike zone allows you to do that better than broadcast. But once again, there are a ton of top players that use the broadcast camera. I think they're making a mistake, but I don't think it's a fatal mistake. I think that it is something that you can live with if you just have to have that camera that makes it look like you're watching it on TV or something like that. I think that the broadcast camera can be fine. You can get used to it. You can get used to figuring out when the runners are stealing. You can get used to figuring out the cameras and, you know, all that good stuff. But I do think that it's an inferior camera to just using whatever you use whenever you're hitting. So yeah, that is for the camera. For the pitching ball marker, most people actually use pitch trail. I don't like pitch trail at all, really, because for whatever reason, it's kind of hard for me anyway, to see the action that a ball is going to give me. Pitch trail shows you where the ball is going to end up and the path that it takes to get there. Classic tells you where the ball starts and the direction that the ball is going to go. I'm a bit what's the word I'm looking for? I'm a bit weird when it comes to this because most people use this. Most people seem to prefer this. I don't. I prefer classic because I get a better idea of what if the pitch is going to be. You know, for example, if a guy throws a slider and you turn classic on, if he has 3 little yellow dots or yellow arrows pointing in one direction, then you know that it's going to be a pretty solid slider. If he has 4, it's going to be an elite slider. If he only has 2, it might be kind of a shitty slider. Whenever you have pitch trail on, it's very hard to tell. But there may be some benefits that pitch trail has that I don't know about that other top players do. So try both of them out. This kind of is more preference, but try both of them out, see which ones you like, and just go from there. Pitch confidence, pitch delay, all this stuff right here is not really all that important. So we'll move on to fielding. Throwing interface, go with button accuracy. It's a lot harder than it has been in years past, but it's not difficult to get used to. I got used to it very quickly, and it's actually a lot of fun. And you can make more mistakes this year, but when you make a mistake, at least you know it's your fault. Whereas if you were just using buttons or pure analog or something like that, it might, you may make a mistake, or your team may make a mistake and it not be your fault at all, other than not choosing to use button accuracy. So definitely use that. Definitely use the throwing meter on fielding decisions, assist, throwing decisions. Okay, throw canceling. This is what I was looking for. Oh, and for the in-play view, also use medium. Don't use anything else. Don't use dynamic or broadcast or anything like that. Use medium. It's the best. Okay, so for throw canceling, I turn it off. And the reason I turn it off is because I used to have it turned on and it screwed me way more times than it ever ended up helping me. But a lot of guys can figure it out, and if you can figure it out, turn it on. A lot of guys can figure out how to really use throw canceling well, do those pump fakes, and get their opponents to really bite and to really make mistakes on the base pass and all that. It can be a very interesting strategy and a very interesting tool in your toolbox. Personally, I've never really been able to figure out how to do it effectively, so one day I just turned it off, and my defense has been way better since then. But if that's not so, if you think you can figure it out and how to do it effectively, throw canceling is basically just like you make the input that you're going to throw it to first base, but then you press the button again and it cancels that throw, and then you throw it to second base because there was a runner at second and you know you wanted him to go to third or something like that. It's basically a pump fake. So yeah. Defensive shift. In the past, I would have told you to turn this to manual so you can do all of your shifts on your own, and you know, you can do what you want. But this year, I'm going to recommend that you go to auto shift just because you don't have that much time in the pause menu. And yeah, I just don't think you have the time to make effective shifts. So just let the computer do it for you. Not that big of a deal. And yeah, that's about it, I think. Yeah, that's it. That is it. So yeah, guys, I promise you my future tutorial videos will be a little bit more exciting than this. Tomorrow we're gonna get into everyone's favorite video. Tomorrow's video always gets more views than any video I ever put out on my channel, and it is my master zone hitting tutorial. Every single time I put one out, it gets a ton of views for me. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that one. And yeah, I will see you guys then. But until then, peace.